everyone. Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Ellie. I'm here with Cyn Lagos today. Hi, Cyn.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. So excited today. Cyn is going to be showing us some fun things in Photoshop and After Effects. Going to be taking some images and making them come to life, which is so fun. I'm so excited. So feel free to jump in the chat, say hi, let us know where you guys are watching from. I'm in San Jose. Cyn, you're in Austin, right?
Yeah, I'm in Austin right now.
Cool. So say hello. Let us know if you guys have any questions or any comments throughout the stream. We would love to hear from you. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and jump over to Behance, behance.net/live. That's where we'll be able to see all of your comments and questions and make sure that we answer everything and just be able to interact with you. So it looks like we have a lot of people joining us today. We have Voodoo Val, Rick Adams, Stony. Hi, Stony. Barry. So many people in the chat today. It's going crazy, which is awesome. I love to see it.
A lot of people from different places.
Yes,
Texas,
all over. Holland. How fun. Austin. Barry's from Austin.
Yeah.
Franco from Switzerland, Mary Grace from South Carolina.
Honestly.
Thank you so much for being here. We're going to have so much fun today. And we can go ahead and just jump in. And Cyn, do you want to introduce yourself and share some of your work and talk a little bit about what you do?
Sure.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cyn Lagos, and I am a graphic designer, street photographer, and a mentor for aspiring artists. I have begun this career in so many different ways. I started as a graphic designer, evolved into photography, and I think as many of you might relate, have jumped into so many different disciplines. So these days I love to teach aspiring artists. It's been a passion of mine. I'm also a former Adobe Creative Resident 2019, which is how I became part of the Adobe family. I wanted to share with you guys some of the efforts I've been putting into teaching online. It's been such a journey with the help of so many different talented folks who have been doing live streaming for quite a bit, like Paco, for example. He's behind the scenes. He's our guy here. And yeah, so let me just show you a little bit of that too. And if you have any questions regarding graphic design, photography, or how to get into learning online or teaching online, definitely drop those comments and we'll try to answer them as we go.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so this is my Behance live stream where I've been sharing all sorts of different disciplines. It's been really, really exciting because every single day I'm thinking, oh, that could be a really cool concept to teach. And I've come to discover that, you know, as an artist, we very much have just our hands in everything. And it's been really exciting to be able to evolve from being a graphic designer in marketing and advertising, which is basically creating work for brands and developing brands and their strength and their growth, to just sort of being a little bit more freeform and just experimenting with my illustration, my hand lettering, my own personal expression and what I want to share online. So I've focused a lot on storytelling. The medium changes quite a lot and it's great, you know, like the medium is able to evolve, and giving ourselves that permission, it's so much fun because at the end, you know, the story still remains. So we've explored animation in Photoshop here. We've done hand lettering in Fresco, which was a whole lot of fun because we got to play with the iPad.
Yes.
We did poster design in Photoshop, just using graphic elements and expressing my love for Miami, my home base. And that was super cool because it was a nice study of what makes a place, what represents a place, what colors, what graphic, as opposed to a photograph. But we also go into editing photographs, which is super cool. I've started Film Fridays, which has been a new venture of mine, you know, as a photographer or as I guess a visual storyteller, you're constantly finding new ways to educate yourself and evolve. And for me, jumping into film, which has been a bit backwards, right? I learned
Yeah.
digital photography for a
Yeah.
while. Yeah, so maybe a lot of people are familiar with that journey. And now I've sort of come into this space of film and learning where everything really comes from. Even some Photoshop tools are, like burning and dodging. That all comes from
Mhm.
film. And that
Yeah.
has been very eye-opening. So we explore that on Film Fridays. Right now we're waiting for some film to be developed. A really mysterious film that came with my film camera will be developed soon. So we'll find out
Whoa.
what was in there.
The person before you,
Yeah, I
it's
actually
their
got,
film.
yeah, it's their film. So I actually got
Whoa.
it at a thrift store when I went to see the launch of the SpaceX launch in Florida.
Yeah.
And my camera's called SpaceX because of that.
Yes.
So I'm really curious what's going to happen. Anyways, it becomes this
Wow.
really nice community of like just exploring and
Mhm.
learning online live streaming like this.
This is so cool. So many resources. So yeah, guys, make sure to go. This is all on your Behance page, right? And your
Yeah.
Behance is your name, Cyn Lagos. So
Yeah.
make sure. And I think that Cody had dropped a link to it in the chat as well. So yeah, guys, go check out all these videos and resources. It's so awesome. We need more education online that's accessible for everyone. And this is so awesome. So thank you for doing all of this.
Yeah, definitely. So today, to jump into what we will be doing today,
Yeah.
we will be doing an experimentation. As always, it's always a bit of an experiment.
Yes.
Like I noticed that I often think of how can I animate something that's 2D, whether that is an illustration or even a photograph. So I thought about creating a 3D animation of, we call it 3D, bringing
Yeah.
photos to life, really, and trying to create different effects on After Effects to bring in a 2D photo into more of like an interactive 3D photo. And you'll see what I mean in a second. We'll sort of showcase some of those here.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to get started. If you guys have any questions as we move along, feel free to drop them into the chat. And we had a comment about your website that they didn't realize that it was a video. So there was like a shock when the van drove right past you in your website. It looks so good. I love that. I think it's so eye-catching.
Yeah, so this is my friend Leo
It's so
Botero
cool.
and I got together and
I love it.
with my creative direction, his great talent for like
Mhm.
videography, we were just able to collaborate so well together. And
Yeah.
I'm always encouraging folks to share your work with other artists and also collaborate with other artists because it was such a cool experience. We woke up super early to set up these posters on the walls of Wynwood in Miami. And
Yeah, for
like
sure.
along the way, we were thinking that would be a good shot. That would be a good shot. But of course, we had planned like a storyboard
Yeah.
beforehand that we were able to visualize. And just having someone that speaks your language, right? Like we all are here because we're sort of like-minded, can really strengthen your ability to express something. So this was super cool. We had so much fun. I hope to do it again because I really loved setting up posters on the walls. It was something I wanted to do, like an outdoor gallery of sorts.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
It was a lot of fun. So we're going to be working on this photograph here and treating it so that we can turn it into a live photo. I guess a live photo is a good term. I'm trying to find the right term for bringing photos to life.
Yeah.
It can be applied to different things. I'll let that kind of load a little bit. It can be applied to different things. Basically, for me, I'm always looking for a photo that has a good background and a good subject or a good foreground that can give us, that's taking a little while. Okay, there it is.
Okay. Oh, there we go. How cool.
So this was a still photograph. So it just gives you that opportunity to go into your archives and find the different ways that you can sort of manipulate the background and foreground to really move it and give it a bit of life. And it's a showstopper, really, because, you know, we're constantly sharing things online and we're just scrolling, you know, 90 miles per hour. But when you see something like this, you say, wait, hold on, what's going on?
What's happening?
Yeah. So a lot of my, I guess, photography side comes through here, because we'll be using really cool things like the camera on After Effects. And so if you're a photographer at heart, that will come into play into learning animation and After Effects. Honestly, everything sort of crosses over. And it's super cool to just always have this like this one kind of advantage, because you've been already practicing a discipline in another front. That's why I think it's like just we don't have to call ourselves a singular title. We can continuously evolve and continue to learn.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know if we want to jump right in.
Let's
definitely would love to take in any questions along the way. We're going to get started in Photoshop. So we will open this up in Photoshop first. So let me go in here. So the reason why I start in Photoshop, there's definitely ways for you to do this in After Effects. So basically we're going to be cutting out the foreground and the background to be able to manipulate each layer individually. You can do this in After Effects, and I have attempted that, but it takes a little bit longer. There's something about the RAM preview that just takes longer for me. And you know, the one virtue of having Adobe Creative Cloud is that you get to play with different tools and they can collaborate together. So you know, highlighting that collaboration. So with dynamic links, we're able to just bring in any file into other programs and update them, and they will update into the other programs. So once you learn one program, just know that that program doesn't have to be used independently. Eventually you can partner them up with other programs as well.
It just becomes that much more powerful because you have that many more tools at your disposal versus just the one. So
yeah, exactly right. Like more tools at your disposal is like the arsenal of tools. Really cool. So we'll be doing that today. We'll start with Photoshop and prep our file, and we'll learn some things here that I think are very very important along the way of any project, really. So we'll be cropping things out. So let's start with that. I'm going to always sort of be very keen on keeping an organization in my files. So I'm going to call my original file master, always keeping a reference point and then copying that so that we can then know that we have our original file safe. I'm just gonna bring in my cursor here. I don't know why I closed it.
Steve asked how far above the ground you were in this photo.
I'm glad you know that that's me.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So it's usually like 30 feet up and above.
Wow.
In this one, I'm actually above water, which was really cool.
That's amazing.
Because I don't know, there's something really funny about like being above water, because the water's moving. So it sort of, it throws your head, it goes for a spin, you know, because your it's just like, but it's a little less daunting because you know that if you fall, which you should never fall,
you're going into water.
You're going into water. So if it is your first time, it is really nice to kind of just go into this sport is called slacklining, by the way. It's a really amazing sport because it teaches you to be independent. It teaches you to really trust yourself and your abilities, because nobody's up there with you. And it helps you confront these like independent expectations that you have. Like you can't force yourself to do the thing. You just have to really like give into the line, give into the movement, give into that balance. So inspired by those things and that experience, I will, be creating this to emulate that, right? It's always kind of like good to take a moment to think about what is the story here. For me, it's definitely balance. Balance in life, right? Work-life balance. We talk about that so much. Coming from a very crucial past year, I think we all have learned how important it is to take some time to slow down and some time to also like approach your work with intention as opposed to just doing it for the hell of it. So that's slacklining for me. I really love it because it motivates me to sort of just keep a strong mindset.
I love that.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to practice, I encourage it.
Yes,
it's for everyone, honestly. Never did I think I'll be doing that.
How did you get the picture? Did somebody else take the photo, or did you have a timer set up or a remote?
No, not at all. Actually, my fiance got on a paddleboard.
Oh my goodness.
I had to trust her with my cameras. She's like, I'm going to take your camera in the water.
Yeah.
And I was like, just don't fall off the paddleboard, please. But she was able to go this far in and, get this angle. So I was so happy because I really seldomly get a photograph of myself because I'm the photographer.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
that's amazing.
The fact that she was able to capture it when I stood up and I was able to hold that, and it felt good. It felt really
awesome.
Good.
I love that.
So kind of a skill set on its own is being able to work and talk. So I'm going.
It's so challenging. Work and talk when people are watching you too. It's like your brain is working so much harder than normal.
So we're going to be basically extracting the foreground, which in this case is going to be me on the slackline. And then I'm going to want this background to be independent of that. There's a few ways to do that. You can definitely use the magic wand tool and start trying to select parts of your file. But another way that I like to do this is I like going into the properties panel here, and it has a few options for me. If you don't see these options, definitely double click your file, make sure it's not locked or anything like that, or it's not a vector file, and you'll be able to see these options there. So I have here select subject. So I'm going to go into that. And it should do a pretty good job at selecting me. So you can see there.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's honestly really amazing because the development of Photoshop continues to evolve. So the program can help you do so many things that usually used to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to be smart. Of course, it didn't do the most perfect selection, and that's okay because we'll find different ways to adjust it. We're gonna be adding a mask to this file, and we can go down here and just click the mask. And what that's going to do is add a little bit like that, which allows us to just kind of play with that mask and make sure that we have some things that are showing and not others. So let me remove the background here. Another trick I like to use is to add a single layer, fill it with any color, preferably something bright. Maybe I'll do red. So I have more visibility of what is being shown and what isn't being shown. So let's do that. So I actually switched my foreground and background colors and just hit Control or Command Backspace or Command Delete. And that just fills it right away. So shortcuts are always such a time saver.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely things like this when it comes to selections, take your time. I usually take a lot of time, so for the sake of this, I'll do my best. But what I'm going to do here that is still kind of really good at saving you time is I'll be selecting the brush and having my foreground and my background in black and white. So you can hit Shift X to just toggle those two over here on your left-hand side. White shows, so white reveals and black hides. So keep that in mind. So we want to reveal, so you can see here, white reveals, right? So that's what's showing at the moment. So we want to hide some of these blue sides that are showing here and maybe reveal a little bit more of my leg that was kind of eaten up over here. And we will be showcasing the slackline itself. So we'll be dividing those two. So I have white at the moment. Let's see.
John asked about using the healing stamp to fix the missing spot on the leg, but you're using the paintbrush instead, right?
I'm using the paintbrush instead. Yeah. So that's good that you know the healing brush. I mean, all of those are very helpful. Just getting yourself acquainted, I feel like some of the most important tools that I use over and over is like the masking properties, the pen tool, very important. I mean, it just crosses over to so many things. So I don't know. I think if you can become an expert in some of those, another way to actually select this is using the pen tool and creating that selection. So that's something that you can also do.
Yeah. And I think it's good to know all the different options, because different photos, you might need to use different tools depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. So knowing all the different options is super helpful. Mariana says the hair is always a nightmare to me.
The hair. Oh yeah. Hair is always kind of hard. Definitely there's different way. Actually, the properties panel can also give you options to select hair. If you have a portrait, sometimes when I have a landscape photo, I'll have also trees and things like that. So I might confuse those two elements. So you do have to gauge that some images are easier to work with to make those automated properties do their job like far easier than others. And so keep that in mind. And then the rest is, you know, for you to kind of just help the program a little bit. You can go in here manually and do those seem painstaking parts, but honestly, you put in a good playlist and you enjoy the process eventually.
Yeah, for sure. John asked if you're using a mouse, a tablet, a pen monitor. What do you use?
At the moment, I'm using a mouse. I'm actually using a gamer's mouse. My fiance and I share the computer, and she loves gaming. And we've agreed on this really cool mouse that I actually really like. Has been good. I used to use the InTwist tablet. Sometimes that hurts my hand. So the ergonomics of some of these technologies are, you know, you have to care about your body. So that's
for sure.
Do not sacrifice your most important tool, which is your hand. So I love you know, doing some stretches in between, either doing things like that just to help me, especially with doing sports outside of my craftsmanship as a digital artist. I want to take care of my hands.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's something to think about. So think about, like, if you're looking for something something that works for you to be doing editing. I know that a lot of people use the pen tool for retouching photography. That's really cool. But one thing I really have enjoyed a lot is using Lightroom on the iPad. So that already has this really cool pen tool. You can sit in however you like, right? Like you can just really
it feels
rest.
more like you're actually drawing, or actually like versus using like a tablet with your computer. I don't know. I feel like when I use Illustrator on the iPad now, and it just feels more natural than like I was trying to use a tablet with my computer before, and it just like I don't know. It just feels more. You're drawing directly onto it, which is just more natural.
And that just clicks something in us too, right? Like the hardest thing is to enter that flow of like, oh, I'm creating something and now I'm evolving into something else because I thought about a different idea. And like the closer you get to that organic part of being able to play around with what you're doing, the better it'll be. I mean, honestly, you can do this in Photoshop too on the iPad. So something to think about. I'm going to bring in the slack line here because I lost it along the way, but I'm going to use this image as a reference on this one.
Cody says, don't forget to stretch. I got RSI in my drawing hand a couple years ago and it's not fun. Oh
yeah, very important.
We do need to take care of our bodies. It's very important. It's so easy to get focused on what you're doing and you're kind of absorbed in the work and forgetting to stand up or stretch or take a break, and even just for your eyes to take a break too. It's
oh yeah. For sure. I use contacts.
Yeah.
And it definitely, you know, I remember once I went to get an eye exam, and my doctor said, you need to remember to blink.
Yes.
I was like, you're right. Sometimes
You're
when
right.
I'm doing
I
illustrations, I stare so fixated, and
yes.
And it was such a funny thing to say, but yes, very true. You know, most important tools we've got is our eyes and our hands for this craft that we work on. And yeah, so I love that we're speaking so holistically here.
I know, it's great.
We were just, you know, when we weren't live yet, we were talking about Austin a little bit, and how one of my favorite parts about living here, I've been living here almost a year now. It was a venture of trying to explore the part of me that loves to do outdoor activities, and you know, also exposing yourself to different cultures has always been very important for me, which is why I picked up street photography to begin with. And yeah, one of my favorite things is how holistic this city can be, you know, really revolving their lives around sports and music. Like how beautiful is that? And art, like one of the most beautiful arts is music, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I like to kind of focus on the stories a little bit and take in what my experiences are teaching me. Otherwise I couldn't call myself a visual storyteller if I don't hone in into the story itself.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ferry said, I usually take a break by watching some photo behind the scenes and some random comedy videos, even some random memes. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, it's good to have something to take a break. You can also take a break and watch Adobe Live pretty much all day. So then you can sharpen your tools and learn other programs. And speaking of that, actually, we have Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge with Voodoo Val every weekday this week at 9 a.m. Pacific. So tomorrow, if you want to tune in a little bit early before Cyn's second stream, you can make sure to catch that and join the Photoshop Challenge, which is always fun and a great way to learn, great way to be a part of the community.
Yeah, so, I always tune into Voodoo Val's
I love Voodoo Val.
live
She's
streams.
The best. She's so fun.
She's so fun, and honestly so cool to work alongside.
Yeah, she's really
I just sort of tune in and work on whatever project I'm working on.
Yeah.
And say hello to everyone.
Absolutely. Stony asked if this photo is near Austin.
Yeah, this is in Austin. This is actually, I was just explaining, this is above water. And this is one of the water holes. This is actually a ranch. I'm just sometimes mind blown how beautiful this place is, because I mean, look at the height of these trees. Is incredible. Gorgeous. To be able to be surrounded by so much abundance.
Yes.
I mean, I lived in Miami for a very long time, and there's parts of Miami that are very city. So we're surrounded by buildings, right?
Yeah.
So that's nice, but there's something about connecting back to nature that can be so amazing. So I think I'm actually taking a trip to Miami, and I'm looking forward to exploring more of the Everglades and you know, going fishing and seeing more of that, so that I can
nature side,
see my home base with a different perspective.
Yeah, I love that. Barry asked, who are some of your favorite photographers?
That's really hard. Oh my God. I feel like I'm going to let everyone down. I have so many, so many of my friends are amazing photographers. And I feel like when it comes to professional photographers, I don't really have a favorite. Don't really look at people's work these days, because my identity as an artist is so important to me that I want to kind of astray from comparison. But I have been mentoring one of my friends who is really great. Her name is Desiree Prieto, and she just does this incredible lifestyle photography, and it just looks so I don't know, something about it just breathes calm. and
Yeah.
it's really beautiful. And she focuses on like lifestyle and portraits, and just being able to see her journey as she evolves now, taking in this journey of freelancing and being more
Yeah.
independent, has been very inspiring to me. I mean, I'm there mentoring her, but she
Yeah, but
doesn't
you're
understand that
still
it's like
inspired.
back and
Yeah.
forth. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's really cool. That's one of my favorite things about teaching. It's
Mhm.
you sort of rediscover your own journey through the journey of others. And I
Yeah.
don't just see that. It really has been really incredible to sort of see, okay, that used to happen to me. Those
Yeah.
fears used to happen to me, or
Yeah.
those aspirations were part of
Mhm.
my journey as well. And I hadn't recognized it or given myself the chance uh, to say, good job. You've come a
Yeah.
long way. You
Yeah.
know, that's also very important. I
Mhm.
do a lot of portfolio reviews on my live streams. So
Oh, cool.
feel welcome to share those with me, because I love being able to give feedback. And also it's not only great exposure, but it's just so important to get the feedback of your
Mhm.
community, because
Yeah,
it might
absolutely.
evolve your project along. um,
Yeah.
Never be afraid of that. It's almost vital to the development of your work. So definitely share like your site, your favorite project, something you're maybe just evolving at the moment that it hasn't been like laid out perfectly, your Behance profile.
Yes.
Yeah, all of those. They're really cool to look at and give me a lot of inspiration, as opposed to like sort of venturing into the World Wide Web and I don't know, running into everything. I'd
Yes.
rather kind of hone in into this little space that we got here.
Yeah. Yeah, and connecting with other people on Behance is so great. You can I think, yeah, a lot of inspiration and just learning from others. And that's part of why like the daily creative challenges are so great, because you can get feedback on your work and you can give feedback to other photographers, other designers. So yeah, make sure to follow Cyn on Behance. Cyn Lagos is her name on Behance, and then you
Yeah.
can make sure to know when she's going live and share your portfolio. And yeah, it's super important. I think other people are going to see things that you may not be able to see when you're so close to your own work, and give input, or sometimes you may not be feeling great about your work, and just having someone say like, no, this is awesome, you're doing a great job, gives you so much confidence. So
Yeah.
yeah, and knowing where you can improve, or maybe what you're missing, it's so helpful to have somebody else's eyes on
Yeah.
that.
Or just getting that like, wow, we're very, we really like your work. And sometimes
Yeah.
we're so hard on ourselves. And then
Yes,
it's
we're so hard on ourselves. You're going to be your own biggest critic for sure. So having
right.
someone else just be like, you're doing great, is so helpful.
So I wanted to highlight something here. So on the
Yeah.
properties panel, you have this view more section.
Mhm.
We're gonna be working on our background, and I just wanted to show how there's all these automated options that can really help your process along without you having to spend too much time having to remove a background, or if you want to create cool effects like adjusting lighting or blurring a background. All of these things are here, and
Yeah.
Adobe Sensei sort of assesses your images to be able to get a chance to deliver this sort of effect. And I think that's super cool,
It's
because
really
sometimes
cool.
you want to change things around. So for example, if I want to change this background, these clouds that I have here, and add a different sky altogether, so Adobe Sensei would just kind of like analyze it and try to include it within all the elements that are in my image. So in this case, for example, let's move this here and move this here. So we have a sky replacement, and it does sort of like a pretty good job here, kind of
Yeah.
changing it for us. We did kind of have our slackliner up here. So it's kind of interesting to just see how much, I mean, it has the trees in the foreground.
Yeah,
Trees
that's
are
really
next
good.
to hair. They're kind of like a nightmare of
Yeah.
selecting, and it basically did all these different steps for us, creating a mask, creating adjustments, light adjustments to assimilate it to the image that we had. So the reason why I would do this, for example, like why would I want to change the image? It all depends, when we're experimenting, everything goes. If you're trying to stay true to your photojournalistic approach, maybe you don't tamper with the image. But if you're experimenting and you're using that image as a source for like play and trying to find new ways of showcasing it and bringing it to life, like in this case, having a good background with clouds is going to be vital to making it feel like it's moving. So if I had a really clear sky where it's just blue, you can move it left and right and it won't look like any different.
Yeah, because moving over the clouds is going to show that motion.
Exactly. So being able to have an option to replace the clouds is really helpful. I do sometimes go into Adobe stock and then maybe look for different options that could be fitting for my scene. Maybe I'm looking for something more dramatic and I want to sort of have full control. And I'll just download an image and replace it and start doing more photo manipulation and compositing. That is so much fun to do in Photoshop.
Yes. John asked, isn't there or didn't there used to be an option to select pixels of the same color with one click?
Select pixels of the same color. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe John, if you want to expand on that. Is it like select, can you do like select same and then the same color? I know you can do that in Illustrator, but I don't know if it's in Photoshop too, actually, because I've never needed to use it.
I know that we have...
Maybe I'm just thinking of Illustrator. Oh yeah.
I know. I'm thinking of Lightroom because we can select the color and manipulate that color instead of doing a global adjustment.
Okay.
You threw us for a loop here, but we're
like,
totally jumping in different programs now.
Yeah, just select the sky blue.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the different select. We can do color range.
That would probably be
image adjustments, selective color, for example. So we can do here and go into the color that we want to change.
Yeah.
So I am actually on the slackline file, which is just the top. But say I wanted to change that, I can go to image adjustments and then go into selective color and then maybe pick a cyan or something and
then you could adjust just that.
I can adjust the different channels that live within that color and then start to change my mood a little bit here and even kind of play a little bit with how much luminosity it has in black and white.
Yeah.
So there's so many ways to really, there's a lot of photo color editing that you can do here. I did treat this in Lightroom because I just love to be able to have that organization because I had plenty of these photos.
Right.
Being able to edit a photo and then apply that preset or filter to other images just keeps handy. My organization heart happy.
Yeah.
Whereas in Photoshop, I feel like everything is a bit more individual based. So, you can develop your workflow wherever you are and just sort of satisfy whatever need you have in Photoshop and then jump into Lightroom. Maybe those are the partners that you choose to play with. Dynamic links work there too. Actually, if you bring in a photo here, edit it, it will reflect into Lightroom as well. Lightroom, I love Lightroom. It's just always such a cool Zen time in there because you're just editing color and improving your photo, enhancing your photo.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we have our slackline edited. Just try not to lose track here. Convert to smart object, just to kind of keep that there organized in one spot. And we can always double click it and edit it so we can still edit our mask. So that's one way to just maintain things in a way grouped, right? So I think about it does enable other settings along the way. So converting something to a smart object can be a way of grouping it or enabling other properties. I think about that also when it comes to After Effects. Like when you pre-compose, you're pretty much creating a group and being able to double click it and edit it within that. So you'll see how those two relate later. I can delete this image in this background red now. I won't be using this guy because I do like my fluffy clouds that
I love
going
those
on.
clouds. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do have this background, but I still have me in it. And I want this background to be independent of the slack line. So I'm going to actually be using the stem tool in this one. I'm going to group them just to make sure I'm using a method that is non-destructive. I'm going to create a new layer and go into the stem tool. And that's going to let me, holding Alt option, I can select the source. And you can see there that
you
source.
Got the clouds. Yeah.
Definitely reduce that brush. I usually select from below and then that kind of like helps me cover it going horizontally, but you can find your own method. Now it looks like I'm just in the sky, in the cloud, which is I'm surfing the cloud or something.
I love it.
Super cool.
Really fun too. If you are just joining us, we are here with Cyn Lagos. She is going to be, I guess, animating this photo essentially in After Effects in a little bit. We're in Photoshop right now. Bring it over to After Effects in a little bit to bring it to life and add some dimension to it. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hop over to Behance so that we can see your questions and comments. And yeah, any questions that you have for Cyn about Photoshop, about After Effects, photography, graphic design, education, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll make sure to get to them.
Yeah, and let us know where you're joining us from.
Yes, so fun to see
I'm
all
so
the different
curious.
locations. Yeah,
especially when I'm on Adobe Live, it's just so amazing to see how
so
worldwide it could be. International. Yeah.
John says, now you look like the airbender flying on his cloud.
Not a bad look.
It's pretty cool. That could actually be a really fun little animation too of the clouds kind of moving around with you on them.
Yeah. So there's so many cool opportunities that you can just play with. But first we got to learn sort of like the different effects and then let the imagination run wild.
Yeah.
So it's honestly fairly simple to just edit away.
Yeah.
It depends on your image and the complexity of your image. You definitely want things to kind of still look as natural as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Picking your source is important. I think like sometimes I'm just stunned at how easy it could be to like just stamp something away.
Yeah, so useful. So you started out in graphic design first and then kind of fell into photography after, or how did that? And I think it's, well, yeah, good. Let's start with that. And then I have more questions for you.
Okay. So that's a curious story. Let's see, how far do I go? So basically, I've always been sort of a creative or artistic individual. One of the first things I bought when I came to the US, my cousin took me to the 99-cent store and asked me to buy anything. And I bought a palette and an easel.
Oh, wow.
And so that was very like telling because I didn't have any artists in my family, but I didn't know about the expectations of careers or anything like that. So, I was like, I'll be a lawyer or something like that. But in a Latin family, like the creative sort of careers, it's less spoken about or less, less sort of like expected or encouraged. Yeah, exactly. So my when I was in high school, I loved creative writing. And I was just getting closer and closer to just anything that was creative, that wasn't fixated on this is the way it is. And instead inviting this idea of like, you can interpret anything and evolve it into however you see it. Your perspective is important. And so writing became the first there, but then I learned more about visual art. And, you know, writing can be beautiful, but then sometimes limiting if you don't have the words. And as a bilingual person, and I mean, English has some beautiful ways of expression, Spanish does too, but at the time, you know, sometimes I felt limited. And art was this visual language of just like, you know, so much opportunity, so much evolution for me. And so it felt really good, and it felt like a home space for me. So I decided to look into how I can pursue that as a career. Turns out there was this career called graphic design that involved computers, which allowed me to legitimize it in the eyes of my family. Hi, Mom, I will study art, but it will be with computers. So she was like, technology, cool. So that was amazing, because I felt like, you know, the support of my family, but also when I went to art school was like one of my favorite times in my life, because I met so many like-minded individuals, and I just made so many friends that just thought like me. And turns out there were so many of us, right? Like maybe some of us don't have the luxury of having grown up around art, and that is true for a lot of different cultures. We don't prioritize it. Museums visits are not a thing in some of our upbringing. So I feel like art is so vital to the evolution of a child and the evolution of a human or an adult, because it gives you this like sense of, hey, like things don't have to be this way. There could be a theory or an idea or a concept that can be just part of your imagination that can be manifested. So, and you could be the guide, the leader in that, you know, ship. So I love art for that, because it really just lets me see like the power in humans and just manifesting imagination, right? So graphic design kind of came into fruition that way. And that was super cool, because I really loved it. Started doing advertising and branding. So developing logos and developing brandings from the start, like logo development, the tone and voice of a brand, and then just launching it out into the ether, the space of the world. And that was such a cool experience. I learned so much from my creative directors, and that those lessons I still carry till this day. I learned so much from my coworkers who had different ways of expressing their art. So some of them maybe had more of illustration style, and some of them I think about like my coworker Patrick Mendez, great guy. He like just works in such a very street aesthetic, and like, you know, you look at him and he just like lives his art, and it's really awesome and inspiring to see. And so that was a really great journey. And then eventually I've evolved into this beautiful space of photography, and like what I see can be captured right away in this little machine. And exploring my neighborhoods and my urban spaces. So I'm just gonna like give a little bit of a visual to what I'm talking about. So like some of the work that I felt so lucky to be able to capture, it came from that I, as a graphic designer, and those principles as a graphic designer that I had learned in school, right? So being able to see contrast and being able to see shapes in day-to-day life was part of that, geometry and a building, and being able to kind of like compartmentalize that into a composition, all kind of stemmed from my graphic design learnings. And then eventually I started to hone in into what like the more particular part of like, what do I see? And then I saw color theory being manifested. I saw maybe the lives of people, and those that I felt like I turned to quite a lot was urban urban neighborhoods, because I grew up in an urban neighborhood all of my life. So I grew up with a single mother. So like that sort of neighborhood was our safe haven for the both of us. And I got to see that. So that like brain memory, that memory kind of was able to just point the camera at something that I found beautiful that maybe someone else didn't. And, you know, being able to see these colors match and the serendipity of life and how it comes in together. And it's like this, people ask me, did you put that person there? I mean, there's instances that I get to speak to strangers, and yes, but there's sometimes that I just think, wow, that's really happening in front of my eyes right now. Yeah, it's that perfect moment.
And your eyes are open to see it, you know? So like a lot of people wouldn't notice that or see that and then think to capture it. So
yeah, exactly.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's so cool to hear like how people get started, and yeah, I love it.
You can see some of that geometry expression too. And a lot of this was all self-taught. So being able to have a resource online and having creators who are so kind and willing to share their process was vital to my own development. Yeah, so I'm sorry, so I'm running out of voice already.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so that kind of just translated into like me just continuing to push forward, and like I would take these trips on my own to New York. I'd never been to New York, and I went by myself and saw all these spaces that maybe that have been photographed 1,000 times. And I thought, how can I photograph it my way?
Yeah, from your own perspective, your own unique view.
Yeah, and that was a challenge in itself. I think it's also important to say that one of the things that kept me moving forward was my community in my local community as photographers. Like I met so many photographers in my local community through social media. So the social part of social media, I exerted, and like I met them in real life, and it was such a beautiful thing to experience. Like I'll just hang out with one of my friends and say like, let's go to downtown. Depot comes to mind. Super cool. Like he has an eye for like street photography, and he's just so such a strong looking person outwardly, and so like delicate with his eye and what he sees and inwardly. And it's really cool to be able to go and photograph with individuals who see the world in different ways, but like you just get inspired, like what are they photographing? That's my dog. He wants to say hi as usual.
The joys of working from home.
Yeah.
We all feel that right now.
Yeah. So he's my protector. He's just like barking at the door right now.
That's okay.
You know. So so that's really cool to be able to collaborate with others. Has always been such a vital part of my evolution, because I'm self-taught in photography. So how can I stay motivated if no one's expecting a project out of me? No one's expecting anything out of me.
It's just yourself.
So experimentation, right? So we go back to our project here and being able to say like, I want to learn After Effects. How can I do that? I'm just going to create a project and just see what evolves from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just opening the program and just seeing what comes from it and playing with different tools. And you're going to be inspired just by the tools that are there for sure.
So Robert says, I learned Illustrator just to make my own logo, and now I'm in love with Adobe Creative Cloud.
Yes.
You know, it starts with the need sometimes, and
and then you fall in love with it. Steve says, fantastic photos. Yeah, Robert says, very beautiful photos. They are very, very beautiful.
So we've created our foreground here, which is the slackliner, and then our background, which is clean from any subject or any foreground. So this is a simple one because I only have a foreground and a background. Sometimes I have a midground as well. So we're going to keep it simple. We're going to have just our foreground and our background. We've converted them both into vectors. We don't need our master to be a vector file. We'll just keep it there for reference nonetheless. And then we're going to be saving this file so that we can then import it into After Effects. So we'll be jumping into After Effects. And if we need to, we'll jump back into Photoshop, and using that dynamic link, we can always update our After Effects file.
So helpful.
Yeah, so I'm going to save this on my computer. Created a section already.
Perfect.
Let's create a new one here.
Chandra says, great photos. Some people said where they were watching from too, like we asked. Let me scroll back
Cool.
so we can call that out. Robert is in San Antonio. Juma is in Uganda. So cool. Chandra is in Canada. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. And feel free to ask questions as we're going along. If you have questions, now that we're jumping into After Effects, if you have questions about After Effects and how you can use these techniques on your own images, feel free to ask. We can still talk about Photoshop as well. But yeah, I would love to hear whatever questions you guys have for Cyn while she's here.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that I experienced learning Adobe Creative Cloud, and just the evolution of like, okay, I learned Photoshop, then I learned Illustrator, and then I learned InDesign, and then I thought, well, I want motion. After Effects and Premiere seem like the next best thing, and definitely intimidating though. It was like, whoa, hold on a minute. There's so much to see here. Like, you gotta just shift your ideas of how to work with things.
Right.
But ultimately, actually, everything is very similar because it is created and developed by the same programmers. I mean, this is a community of different people working on different softwares, but nonetheless, it's one single umbrella. And so being able to know one program will help you navigate another. And so we'll just sort of talk a little bit about the user interface here of After Effects so we can get a bit familiarized with it and not feel too overwhelmed with the different types of buttons. So I'm going to create a new project, and you'll see here right away we have this entire panel with multiple things, but all you have to think about is in the middle here, we have our preview, basically looking at our artwork. So this is where our composition, aka artboard, would sit. And on our left-hand side here on our panel is basically where we import everything and store all of our artwork that we're bringing in. So anything linked, like it could be your logo, it could be audio, it could be footage, right? Like actual video footage. In this case, it will be a Photoshop file that we'll import, retaining the layers. So there's a lot of like flexibility with the kinds of files that you can like bring into this section here. So think of it like your suitcase of goodies that we will be bringing into our timeline. So that takes me into my timeline down here, which basically allows us to just travel in space and time and just create different effects and tell it what to do in point A and point B, and sometimes something in between. So it really interesting for me. I've been teaching Photoshop animation because it was my natural way of learning a little bit more about the timeline. So when we're in Photoshop, we can always enable other workspaces, and one of them is the animation timeline. So if you feel too overwhelmed to jump into After Effects, get yourself familiarized with the timeline in Photoshop, which will give you a little bit of a more like soft and entrance into what that feels like and how to navigate that. If not, just kind of jump into After Effects and kind of just go with the wind, right? Like, why not?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, if you're here, you're already making a great step in learning, so we're good to go. On our right-hand side here, really cool is all of our basically effects and properties of like what we can change and what we can apply to our files in order to change them and change the audio. We can change the shape, the position, transform it, change techniques, and it can get really really, I don't want to use the word complex, but really like just so many options for you to play with. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of effects in here that eventually, once you get yourself familiarized with them, you can think of something like, for instance, I wanted to add light into this image. And I thought, well, there's an effect for that. I can just drop this in here. And that's so cool because it's almost like a ready player go, kind of like ready
Yeah.
and play. I'm thinking of like that book, Ready Player One. I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys ever read it,
Yeah.
but really cool book, by the way. If you're into reading books, I love reading books. I don't know if anybody loves reading books these days, but it really
I do.
activates my
Yeah.
visual eye because it's
Mm-hmm.
telling me a story and I have to decipher the
You're
visual for it.
picturing it. Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, that works for you too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've always loved reading. Always, always. So,
Yeah. So definitely another way of just practicing, exercising that visual brain of ours. So what we're going to do here is we're going to import that Photoshop file. And I think I put it in here, slacklining live.
Robert says, I just started After Effects 3 weeks ago. So it's perfect. You're at the right
Wow.
place. Yeah, this is a great stream for you to be watching. And
Yeah.
you can watch replays of past streams too on Behance. There's all the past streams that you can go back and watch. So if you want to watch other After Effects streams, it's a great place to just get a lot of really great free education.
Yeah. And the other thing is that it's really commendable that you're 3 weeks in and you're still here committing the time. That's when you know you're passionate about something, right? Like you'll put in the time.
You're not going to give
up
up on it. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to import this Photoshop file. It might look different for you. I am working in Windows. I really like Windows for anything that has to do with heavy things like After Effects or Premiere. It just gives me all the specs I need. If you are Mac user, yes. Yeah. Then don't worry about this. It will look very similar nonetheless. So when we hit import, we're going to get this dialog box, which should look the same on both ends. And it asks us to import it either as a footage, a composition, or a composition that retains the layers. So we want to retain those layers that we set up before, that slackliner and that background. We want it also to merge the layer styles into our footage in this case, and we'll click OK. And it'll basically create a composition based on those specs. So we don't have to worry about changing the composition specs. It picks that up already for us. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you want to change the specs on Photoshop beforehand, and know that will populate later in After Effects. So we have our composition here. I'm just gonna drop this in here. Oh, it's already dropped in. Cool. So we have this. I'm gonna rename this because I don't like these random numbers.
Yeah, and then you can't remember what's what. Yeah, Cody says you can rewatch our past streams on Behance by scrolling down or on the Creative Cloud YouTube. So definitely check those out. There's so much there, so many great streams, and yeah, it's just a really great resource and so much that you can learn. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, plus the benefit of live streaming is that you get this like rare thing, which is that true interactivity of being able to partake in class, so to speak.
Yeah, it's so true.
So it's really up to you if you have a question or you want to maybe talk about something that you're curious about, and maybe allow I want to call them instructor, mentors to sort of divulge in that idea. Like, I think that's so special about live streaming that kind of keeps me on it too, like being able to interact.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. It's a very rare opportunity. And to see other people's processes, I feel like we don't get to see that very often. And even if you've been working in Photoshop for years, watching someone else work, you're going to learn different things or just see how someone else does something differently. And you're going to learn for sure. There's no way that you're not going to learn from watching someone else's process.
So just as a reminder, this is what we're going to be creating today. Let's
So
see if this
fun.
one loads in this. Now we have we have a lot of things running, so that's kind of how that goes.
Hi, Annika. Thank you for joining us. If you are just joining us, Cyn Lagos is here. We were in Photoshop a little bit, separating these layers. Now we've just jumped over to After Effects. You can watch the replay of this stream right after this. It will be available if you want to catch the beginning.
Okay.
Feel free to drop any questions in the chat or comments, anything that you want to share with us. We would love to hear from you. So thank you for being here and watching.
Cool. All right. So what we have here, now that we've jumped into this, I hope you didn't miss this part because that will probably throw you for a loop. So we have our composition here, which as I spoke before, it's sort of like grouping things together. And then we can always double click it. And then we can jump into the layers that are inside of it. So that's a really good way to kind of to keep things organized, but also to add effects to a whole compiled section. And so think of those things as grouped, right? So if you're familiarized with how grouping works, and then you add an adjustment layer to that, pretty much the same. So there's a bit of similarities, naming changes a bit, but that's okay. So it works along the same way. What we have here, we have our slackline and we have our background. Okay, so what we're gonna do first is we're gonna create a camera. So this is what's gonna allow us to play with how the view shifts over. So we we talk a lot about, like, when it comes to, I mean, maybe you're familiar with X and Y axis, right? But with the camera, we're going to be able to manipulate the Z axis, which is like inward, forwards, and backwards. And that's super important in kind of creating this feeling of this scene looking more 3D as opposed to flat. So I'm going to right click here and go to new, and then we're going to press camera. And so this brings our camera settings up, and you can see a really cool icon of the camera. And it looks fairly complex, but ultimately it's reacting, it's hoping to behave as a camera would. So think about whether you were holding a camera, would you pan, would you tilt, would you, sort of orbit around your subject? If you have a bit of camera experience, that probably sounds familiar. Otherwise, don't be too overwhelmed. Just follow these settings. I'm going to set this as 50 here as the focal length and leave this film size as a 35. And I'm going to make it a 1-node camera, which basically means that the camera sort of tilts around itself. And a 2-node, it orbits around a point of interest. So that's the way I understand. I think it, like, 1 node is simple enough and it works. So we can always change that, by the way. So don't worry if this doesn't work. You can always pull up the settings later and shift that.
Readjust. Yeah.
So press OK. Lets us know that this will only work on 3D elements. So right here in the timeline, we're going to find this little 3D icon. And so we want to press that on the layers that we want to convert to 3D. So we have our slackline and our background. This is our master layer. Again, that's just reference. So I'm just leaving it there, but I might delete it. But we don't need to convert it to 3D. Okay, so that is going to allow our camera to enable those 2 layers together. So just to kind of give you a bit of a preview of what that looks like, let's kind of bring down the timeline a little bit here. By the way, if your work isn't showing as fast, or your computer is not that kind of powerful to take on things like After Effects, and you're working on that, I know that was sort of a feat for me. Being able to shift your preview from like full high-res preview to third or quarter previews is going to kind of ease your process to be able to have the render preview work a bit better for you. Also being able to cut your work area, right? So if you bring your work area in, it would just render that area.
Okay. Yeah. That makes
or
sense.
You can alternatively put your playhead anywhere and hit the letter N, and that will sort of shorten that work area to wherever the playhead ends. So being able to have those shortcuts is very helpful. Having shortcuts in After Effects, I've noticed for me, I'm able to like just kind of run the show a little bit easier, more much faster. I will go to the spaces where the settings are, just so that you have a visual where they're stored as well in this case. So let's see how our camera is being viewed right now. So right now we're gonna have our camera, let's go into the views. We're gonna put 2 views. So now we have our camera here on our left-hand side, and we have our photo here on the right-hand side. So you can see our camera is basically, it's this little diagram. Our camera is right here, and this is our layers. Those thin little lines are our layers. So right now they're flat and they're one single plane. We want to push them in, push them away from each other, so that starts to create that 3D effect.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of use my view. So right now we have different viewpoints of the camera. We have top view. We can use left view. Down here, we can use bottom view, which pretty much is the same as top. And you can sort of see which one you feel more comfortable with. I know that's, you have to kind of get a sense of, well, this is the camera and these are our files. And that will help you navigate this a little bit easier. I do like having one view on this. I'm going to do top for this, and just so we can hone in into what's happening here. And so we have these different arrows, and some of these arrows are basically referring to the X axis or the Y axis. And one of them is referring to the Z axis, which is in or out. And so right now we're gonna be working with the Z axis, so we can push our files away from each other and create that illusion of dimension.
Yeah.
So let's click on one of our files here. Is there a question?
No questions yet.
Okay.
Robert is commenting on wishing that they had known a month ago about being able to just minimize like how much RAM you're using, but he was like, I just wanted an excuse to max my RAM anyway. So, but now you can make things run a little bit faster.
Yeah,
Super helpful.
I know
tips.
those little things that really, like, they're game changers. They don't necessarily look like eye candy, but when it comes to the workflow, it's just
faster and
so awesome.
Yeah, the faster we can work, the more we can create. So it's always nice to have little tips for how to speed things up a little bit.
Yeah, another tip, I mean, I don't know how to call this little icon, but it's like a squiggly icon above your tab. If you're in any section of your work area, for example, if I'm here or I'm in my timeline, I can hit that squiggly line, and it just maximizes that so that I can be able to see it fully. I can go down here as well and say, like, I wanted to really see my timeline more clearly. I can open it up or make it smaller, especially once you start working with keyframes, which are little icons that lets the file know how to behave in certain parts of the time. So again, we hit that squiggly again. If I click inside, I can hit that squiggly and it makes this full frame.
Yes.
And it's just so cool. Like if I want to render it, I can just hit that and it kind of helps me compartmentalize my focus. And also if you're working with a client, really cool to just like show them something without them getting overwhelmed.
I feel like that's one of those keys that you would hit accidentally, and then you're like, what happened to my workspace? And then you have to do a
Oh my
Google
God,
search of
yeah,
like, what just happened? But then once you figure it out, you're like, oh, actually, this is so helpful. And then you'll use it all the time. But one
absolutely.
of those
That's
things that's happened to me so many times where I'm like, what did I just
so many
do?
times. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like so many times I would step in here and I would just sort of close it and try to restart everything because I would double click a composition and
Yeah.
I would be like, where did everything go?
Yeah.
And yeah, so being able to understand why those things are there and
It's
how they're
so
helping your
helpful.
workflow
Mm-hmm.
will be very important.
Yes. Oh, Cody says that I think it's called the tilde. I think that's
Tilde.
right. I don't know how to pronounce it though, but it's like the little like this little
Yeah.
thing.
But do
So
we want to officially rename it Squiggly? Because
I think we should officially rename it Squiggly.
yeah,
I think it's way more appropriate.
Yeah, it's been blessed here on
It
Adobe
is
Live,
what it is
so.
now. Yes.
Right. So just a visual of what just happened. Basically, we moved these in space, which means this background is a little bit further back than our subject, the slackline. I mean, it's me, but yeah. So under the tools bar here at the top, let me see. I'm gonna just try to zoom in here so you can see. We have these 3 different tools that basically show us different spaces of how the camera is viewing the scene. So we have the orbit tool, we have the pan tool, and the dolly. So if we click any one of those, you can start to see what happens to the scene. So if I go in here, let me just zoom out. I can like do this. This is the dolly.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Like
so,
a doll, like pushing a dolly.
Like pushing a dolly, right? So the dolly is that in cinema is that literally that dolly that they move forward this gigantic camera back in the days when it was film camera. So crazy, the evolution of camera and photography or videography. Then you just see how I love how those terms are borrowed and put into After Effects because we're talking about a camera. So I love that that's like it stays true to the practice. We have also here the pen. So the pen could go either way. So we can pan left, we can pan right.
Yeah.
Above. And then we have the orbit, which does this really, I'm trying to like do this.
Like goes around in an orbit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to use the orbit can get a little wild when you use it directly on top. So I kind of like to jump in here and like change the positioning or changing the orientation will help me with the orbiting without it going, kind of out of whack and too wild for me. But definitely those 2 options, you have the option to move things around with all these 3 different tools. And that's technically what's happening in our camera. So if we go into our top view and we start like moving things around here, not with this, but when we're moving things around, you can see that we can shift things forward, we shift things backwards, and that just sort of starts shifting the camera viewpoint.
Yeah. Dorina says, I still struggle with manipulating the Z-axis in After Effects. So you're at the right stream. This is the perfect demo for you because
if you hover over, you can definitely see the different, you can see the 6 Z. Don't know if you can see that, but Z, it says Y, and then we have this rotation for Z, right? So it goes like that. Yeah, it's definitely like a careful, you have to be a bit more like cautious, like, oh no, I just flipped it upside down and I don't know what to do. So
Robert says that his mind is blown right now.
Yeah, cool. So I'm glad you're getting familiarized with part of After Effects you're excited about, because that's how I felt when I discovered the camera, and I was like, wow, no way. Okay,
so powerful.
So let's see. I'm trying to think in the order of how I want to apply this. Questions are welcome at this point. I'm just going to think through.
Feel free to ask questions as we're going along. There's a lot of agreement about renaming it's the tilde key to the squiggle. So
Yeah, it happened here, folks.
it happened here.
Yeah.
From now on. Yeah, so feel free to ask questions. Again, if you're on YouTube, hop over to Behance so that we can see your chat. You'll see all of your questions and make sure to answer those. If you missed the beginning of the stream, there will be a replay, and there's replays on all Adobe Live, so which is super helpful. There's also Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge happening at 9 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow with Voodoo Val. So make sure that you join that, learn more about Photoshop, join the Discord so that you can share your work, give feedback to others. It's a super great community. So yeah, stay tuned for that tomorrow. And yeah, Fairy put in the chat, just like so we can remember the different axes. So like X is top or bottom, Y left or right, and Z closer or further. So
yeah, perfect.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
So I just deleted that master file and changed the colors here so that I have better visibility of what I'm working on. I have a 20-second timeline at the moment, but I don't have to work in 20 seconds. I can come in here and shorten that, and also shorten my workspace so that I can be working on a smaller area.
Yeah.
And this also applies when you're rendering. So if you have a workspace that is 20 seconds at any point and you wanted to minimize that, or you were, you know, maybe you're working for someone and they say, actually, the specs are now 10 seconds or 15 seconds because it's a story on Instagram, then you can definitely do that here without having to change too much, or you can change the composition. But, you know, this is an easier way to just get it done.
Yeah. Duma asks if you can animate more than one camera for a project like this.
You can animate more than one camera. So that's another option that you have. You can also do the 2-nod camera, which can give you that point of interest, gives you different effects, depending on what you're hoping to do and how complex you want to make it. I noticed that like the one camera kind of worked for this a lot easier, so we stuck to that. We're gonna modify the background. In this case, I think I'm gonna start there first before changing anything on the camera. I think I wanna, right now I have increased the size a little bit. Don't hold shift. So I always think about like shift is proportion, right?
Right.
But it isn't in other programs. So in Illustrator, shift is proportion.
Yes.
But if you hold it in Photoshop, it disproportion instead.
I know, it's very confusing.
It's very confusing.
Robert asked if you were to keep it to this length, would you be able to loop the video so that it could kind of keep replaying over and over to make it longer?
So we're actually gonna do a looping expression at the end of this. So if you stick around, or we might end up doing that tomorrow, I can show you how expressions could be enabled. And expressions are pretty much like, it looks complex because it looks like coding, but it does it for you, and it's really cool. It's like a magic trick that it just like happens and kind of cuts the work of like having to repeat things. You might have to repeat things at first to kind of create a perfect kind of, not like a fidgety look, and then you can loop it. So we will be touching on that, something that I had to think about when I was doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to increase and decrease the background just to make it feel like it's sort of moving with the scene. I was thinking about moving it left and back, but it doesn't make sense that the trees would be moving. If I had a different scene, maybe I'll move the clouds left and right, because that's what the clouds would probably do in that case. So we want to sort of create that sense. I'm going to just make it smaller and increase it in time. So in order to do that, we're gonna just bring down this arrow, and it gives us some options here. We have options like positioning, the scale, the orientation, so many cool stuff. We're going to be playing with the scale, as I just spoke about right now. So what we're going to be doing is just think in terms, when it comes to animation, it's about thinking in terms of like, where do you want it to end up? And then how do you want to modify that start? So if you just think of it as point A and point B, it really simplifies the animation process.
Yeah.
It can get more complex than that, and you will evolve into that because it's so cool to be able to just have those in-betweens and change it up a little bit. But just minimizing it to that can help you. Yeah, can help you approach it in a way that's like, even if you're like an expert, just helps you approach it.
Yeah.
So let me zoom out here. So I want to change the scale. Let's say I want to have the scale end here. So it's that big. Yeah, let's say it's that big at the end. Then I'm going to travel to the end of my timeline, put the playhead there, and then click on the stopwatch, which will enable a keyframe. So now we have this little diamond-like symbol that is our keyframe, and it represents what the behavior is at that moment. And then we're going to zoom back, and you notice that nothing changes really because nothing else has been placed in keyframe A. This is our keyframe B. So we're going to go and change the scale and reduce it maybe to where we were, somewhere here. I like to kind of bring it outside of the canvas a bit or the composition, because when the camera is moving, it might show some of the areas that don't have anything. Right. So that's something to think about.
So leave some extra space for that.
Yeah. So when we do that change of the scale, you'll notice here that it automatically actually creates a keyframe for us. I didn't have to hit the stopwatch. That might be a bit confusing at start. You hit the stopwatch at first, and you think naturally maybe I hit the stopwatch again, but that will actually turn everything off.
Okay.
So it will propagate a keyframe for you. Otherwise, there is this little guy here, and you can hit that. So like, say for example, we want to do something else here in the middle, like, I don't know, go crazy and change the orientation. So we put a keyframe, we can click that and then spin it around somewhere in the middle. So that's what happens. No, we're not going to be doing that. But but anyways, that was just an idea of like how you can then choose to add a keyframe as opposed to like changing the settings. Two ways of doing that. So now when we let that render, it will render a little bit slower. As you can see, it starts to apply those settings, and then it'll loop back
more quickly,
a little bit faster.
Oh,
and
it's so cool already. Look at that.
Yeah. And being able to change that work area will allow us to kind of like play with a little section without sort of using all the power of our computer. And, it kind of gives you more ability to see the render preview. And also this spec right here, very important.
Yes. Jose says, woo, Miami in the house. Cyn is amazing. That's from Jose.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Miami in the house.
Miami in the house. And then Robert asked if it's the same time tomorrow. So yes, same time, 9:30 Pacific time. We're going to be here again with Cyn. So make sure that you come back tomorrow for even more of this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. We're going to be, let's see how far we get here today, but we'll be showcasing some other examples as well. So we'll try this same technique.
Yes.
So yeah, that was already kind of really cool to be having the background changing. Will give us that neat effect already, which is like, an illusion really at the end of the day.
Yeah. But John says it looks like you're ascending, which it does. It kind of looks like you're like going up.
So you just have to assess some of your images and think, well, which ones could work for this? Because even when I was working, I was thinking to myself, like, wait, hold on, maybe I can. So I brought in some reference images of some of the images that could function for this. So I thought maybe, for example, this image which has the clouds, and how we can like
Right.
maybe move those clouds left and right, or change the water here, could be cool. And so, you know, your imagination can just like run wild once you know some of these effects of like, ultimately what we have to do is find an image where we can split the foreground and the
Right.
background.
Yeah.
And the background is interesting enough that when we zoom in into it, or we shift it to left and right in After Effects, then it will show that it's being moved, and you know, show that kind of illusion of motion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that we've done that, I don't think I want to move the slackline. I don't want it to look too, I don't know, maybe I do, but let's see what it looks like when, because you know, the slackline might move left and right, but not necessarily. Right. Let me see if I can see how it looks once it's scaled. So right now I'm not animating, I'm just scaling, and there's no keyframes. I have not set up the time watch. I'm just looking at what may happen. What does it look like when I change the scale properties? Maybe it's a positioning thing. Maybe it sort of moves slowly to the right too, you know, so it gives an illusion of the camera.
So you can kind of see a preview there of what would happen if you were to add in those keyframes.
Yeah, I always think that if you can do it in the transform tool, or you can change the scale, you can change the positioning, you can totally set keyframes for point A and point B of that, and that could be animated. And that's how I approached it in Photoshop too. If you can add a opacity, right? Like you can change the color modes. You can definitely create a before and after of that, and just set keyframes. Keyframes are keeping a memory of what happens in a certain time, and then the next time. So that's what they do. Yeah, so that's one way of approaching it. I'm probably going to just change the scale just a tad bit, not too much, to just like give it a bit of movement. So that's moving. And I'm just going to move it a little bit too, because it wouldn't stay still too much. It could look like, for example, a cinematograph where there's always an element of stillness,
which is cool too. It's
really cool too.
Yeah.
I love playing with those as well.
Yeah. Clement is joining us from South Africa. Hello. Thank you for being here. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We have a little bit longer with Cyn, so make sure to ask your questions while we're here. And yeah.
So Robert said, I'm a visual learner, so I'm really loving this.
Yes.
Yeah, I
think most creative people are visual learners. Yeah.
I think I had to like understand that factor too, because even when it comes to slacklining, when I watch someone do something, I feel like I can do it. It's like monkey see, monkey do effect. But when someone tells me, okay, you have to place your knees this way, and you have to sort of use your abs. I mean, I can understand the concept, but when I see it happen, it's just like really, okay, I can do that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it applies to things like this too. You just see the visual, and it gets sort of leaves a mark, right? Some people are the other way around. They really need to hear the details, the technical part of it. I mean, I play with a little bit of everything. Like I sometimes read something, watch something, only hear it. Like maybe it's an audio. Like for example, if you replay this and only hear the audio, and you're just like, I don't know, cooking, that might sort of remind you of what you saw, and it might stay with you a lot longer.
That's true. Yeah. Jordan says, once I watch someone do something once, I'm good to go. But reading it takes a lot longer. Yeah, that's how I am.
Yeah, maybe a combination of those things. Over and over, you know, like if you do it, at least I'm coming from a place of like being a self-taught artist as well, and using the resources of the World Wide Web, and understanding how I can use those. You know, like in school, we used to take notes, and you know, in real life, taking notes helps too. And so depends on your way of doing it. I always think there's mindset and practice, right? So you've learned the technique, and so that your mindset has arrived at understanding what the technique looks like. But then there's the practice part. You got to now do it, and then do it again. And so, you know, and then you really know it because you understand what you were doing, and then you've practiced it, and you kind of hit like a few, you know, like challenges along the way, and you troubleshoot it, and then you become an expert if you do it over and over.
Yes, absolutely.
We're gonna now animate the camera.
Okay.
So cool, we've arrived at the camera now. So what we've done so far is that we've changed the scale of the background and scale of the subject or foreground. And I've done opposite scale. So one is increasing, the other one's decreasing just a tad bit to create that effect. And now we're gonna move the orientation of our camera. So the same way, we're gonna create a keyframe in point A and point B. Let's start at point B. And we're gonna just look at our orientation options here by just shifting the numbers a little bit. So I can make the camera sort of pan, like if I had an imaginary camera person, or AKA my beautiful fiance, who's also holding a video camera, then
at the same time on a paddleboard somehow.
Right. That would be so wild. My heart would probably be like, so don't drop my camera.
Yes.
It was such a vote of confidence. It's like, I believe in you.
I trust
Please don't drop my camera in the water. And things went well. So
you got a good one there.
I got a good one for sure. So I'm going to kind of imagine a person panning up and down. So that could have been a cool effect, right? Like I'm panning up and down. You can see that looks a lot different than the moving positioning our file, because our files are in 3D space, are separate from each other.
Yeah.
I can also choose, for example, I'm going to hit Control C or Command Z here to undo. I can also shift it from the left, so it's coming through that way, and so it starts to reveal. So I think I kind of like that effect. I mean, you can vote on the comment section if we want up or down.
Up or down, or left to right.
Or left to right, because
what everyone says.
It's kind of cool to have like a moment of, oh, it reveals.
Yeah, kind of seeing more of the trees, more of the environment as it's going around.
If you think about it in terms of intention, if you're tilting up and down, you're giving a sense of scale, right? So scale might be important for something like slacklining, because that's the wow effect. Like, wait, hold on a minute, that's 30 feet in the air.
High. Yeah.
In another way, when you tilt left and right, it can give that illusion of like, whoa, hold on a minute, like this is a flexible line, like this person can, because in a way that's what I'm doing there.
Right.
Flexing my quads and honestly using my entire body, but that those hands are really counterbalancing the left and right to make sure I don't fall over.
For
so
sure.
that could be accentuated with the horizontal motion. So we can definitely
saying left to right. Fairy says zoom in, zoom out, but you're kind of already doing that in those first keyframes that you added into the layers.
So Fairy, we zoomed in and zoomed out on the independent layers, which will help in that illusion. So definitely do that part. I feel like it really already starts to make the effect happen. I'm going to be doing the left to right then. So
let's do it.
We've set up our keyframe here already because I've changed the properties and I had my stopwatch on. Then we're going to go here to our left side and you can see something start to kind of get weird. So we can start to like scale those spaces. That's what I was referring to before. It changes that. So that's because of what we're doing here with our scaling, but we'll change it in a little bit. So.
Oh, David asked if you're going to be saving this as a GIF or MP4.
Okay, so that's a good question because it all depends on what you are using it for.
Where are you
where are you sharing your work? So if you were to correct me if I'm wrong, but if on Behance it supports GIFs, right? And it supports PNGs, it supports MP4s. I'm pretty sure.
I'm
But
pretty sure too, yeah. But like
yes,
Instagram's only MP4, right? They don't support GIF.
Instagram doesn't support GIFs. So
Yeah.
you might, and in addition to that, it will kind of decrease the resolution of your file if it's high res.
Yeah.
So I would recommend using QuickTime Export because it's a little bit less on the resolution. If you're sharing this for, to share it on YouTube, for example, or spaces that support high resolution, like 4K files, things like that, then H.264 is a go-to for me. So it all depends on where you're going to be sharing this. I know that on my website, for example, I definitely want to show the max. And so I'm going to be exporting this as H.264 and enable that as a preview whenever I want to showcase maybe a series of these, which might happen. Actually, I want to share them on Behance and I want to share it on my website because I think it's so cool to see like the works we do here on Adobe Live.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're gonna let that render and see how that turns out. Do keep in mind that whatever you see rendering, the render preview that we see happening here will look a lot faster in your final export. This always is a lot slower. So I'm gonna shift it a little bit because it's zooming in too much.
John says, what would be awesome is if when you're ascending, wings started coming out of your back and then growing. That would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
I love hearing everyone's ideas. It's so fun, just like throwing them out there, brainstorming.
I mean, what's really neat also is that you can, like when you say that, it makes me think of fresco. Like why?
Yeah,
that would be so cool to just sketch. Like I can bring in my photo because you can import an image and you can start drawing on top of it and non-destructively in a new layer. And you can work with vector brushes there. So which means we can bring in a vector file here and then like sort of animate that. We can reveal it slowly. How funny, like you just so many. I love the artistic expression of different artists because some of us go really like sci-fi. Some of us are more like
realistic.
Some of us are very like explosive and others like more like quiet, and those things are also like, so I appreciate those so much too because it's like, wow, I can just like look at somebody's work and I feel like I just got a breath of fresh air, you know. Whether it's because their tones are all pastel and beautiful and toned down, or maybe I want to feel hyper and excited and I get to see this really cool neon techie. We worked on a poster which was for inspired by Miami, and that was so fun because we did everything expressive and super colorful, inspired by the sunsets and the neon and all the colors that I've been able to capture in Miami. And so like being able to see to bring that into our like expression, like visual expression is so much fun.
So fun. I love that.
So that starts to sort of change over the time from A to B. It looks like that. And again, you can hit that squiggly so we can have this full preview.
Yes. It's looking awesome.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
So I want to actually add a light effect here to kind of bring it. Basically, I want to create more of an ambience. So I'm going to go in here and select everything, and then we're going to pre-compose these files. So pre-composing, beyond the many complex reasons why we would pre-compose, this is just a way of grouping our files and keeping them all in one set. So we've pre-composed that file, which means we can drop in any effects we want right on top of it.
And it'll apply them to everything within that group.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to go into the effects panel. So the effects panel is super cool because it kind of gives us all of these different effects and things that we can just apply and then change the properties a bit to just make it our own. So we're going to be looking for CC Light Sweep. and we're gonna apply it directly on top. So 2 ways of doing this: you can select that file and just double click, or we can literally drop it on top of our workspace and it will apply to it, or we can apply it on top of the layer here. I hope I'm using the right terminology there, but basically you get my drift.
Yeah.
So that creates this really like Star Wars laser beam situation, yes, which is not quite what I'm after. So the cool thing is that we can change the properties here on the left-hand side. We can start to change all the different, let me go more, all the different options that it gives us. So it tells us we can change the direction, the shape, the width, the intensity of it. So we want to manipulate some of those to start making it look a bit more like what we want. I definitely want it to be more open.
Yeah, and less like so direct.
Less direct, right? Yeah. So I'm going to increase that width, and that starts to look a little bit more like an ambient light. And then it says sweep intensity, like it can be like, oh my God, I just got struck by lightning.
Yes.
Our imaginations are running really like sci-fi today.
Yes.
So the edge intensity, we can just manipulate all that. Mind you, we're not animating this just yet. In the timeline, it hasn't been specified that it should change from point A to point B. This is basically our status quo. Like this is
what
how
it
we
will
want
look like, but then you're going to animate it after you set what it should look like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can define those properties. You can also even change the color. So if I wanted to make it maybe like white is a bit too striking, because yellow. I'm trying to emulate maybe a source of light, which would be like the sky, then I can start bringing it a little bit closer to a yellow hue, or like, you know, maybe you're doing something more artistic and you're trying to create sort of like a film, a film strip. What is it called?
Like a light leak or something.
A light leak, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So you're trying to create a light leak, and maybe this is just absolutely a texture that you're trying to add on top of your scene. You can totally do that too. So there's a lot of really cool options for this to play around. Sometimes I apply it on top of text to just kind of give it a sheen.
Oh,
and, and so I'll just make it a bit more narrow in those cases. So I'll kind of make it a little bit yellow in this case, just to make it feel a bit more like sky, more like the sun, more the warm area. But I still want it to show, so I don't want it to like disappear on me. So stay.
The balance of making it look natural without having it.
Right? The theme of today is balance.
The theme of today is balance. Yeah.
So ask yourself, how can you practice balance? Balance could be physical, could be like trying to jump from, you know, I don't know, one rock to the next, or it could be completely mental, where you're actually truly trying to balance something that maybe you do often and trying to find a balance on that. I know that if I work too much on that day, I'll try to find the balance and go on a trail with Toby One Kenobi, which is my dog.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah. So we'll go on a trail, and I feel like, you know, that balanced my day of lots of tech, lots of sitting, to a bit more activity and mental growth. Because how can we express anything on our digital realms if we don't, you know, intake our real lives out there? So that's kind of the way I like to think of it. So now we have this really cool lighting. Of course, the lighting hasn't been animated. So we are going to be moving the positioning of this light so that it looks like it's traveling along
it's not
the
just
way.
Static.
Right, it's not just static. So I'm going to go to the left-hand side here, go down, transform, I think. No, wait.
John
There it
says,
is.
when I was in graphic design class, the professor was adamant about balance and space usage. Yeah, very important in composition is
Wow.
balance, an element
I
of
love that.
principle of graphic
Balance
design. Yeah.
and space usage. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
It's very
when you're
important.
photographing or when you're designing a poster, composition and balance is so vital to the
Yes.
way your viewer intakes that information.
Yeah.
So being able, if sometimes you look at something, and mind you, balance doesn't mean minimalism, because
Yes,
you look at beautiful cultures that express so much complexity, like the Mexican culture. You look at their artwork and it's full of pattern and
very
color,
intricate.
and it's beautiful, but yet those patterns have literally a pattern. I would like,
Yeah.
they're very specific, and they have this aesthetic. The colors have a balance because they're complementary, or they're monochromatic or whatever it may be. In illustration, I often watch a lot of live streams that the
I
illustrators
love the illustration live streams.
Yeah, I love those too. And they always talk about like, I want to add texture here, but probably I'll have to add it here on the right hand side to add balance.
Yeah.
And I just love that. I love the way that is observed.
About it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're going to change the direction here. So it starts to tell me, you can see I'm not animating it. I'm just trying to see
just seeing the preview of where it's going to go. Yeah.
I think it's this one actually. Yeah, there it is. Center. So the center. So we're going to be moving it from left to right. So I'm going to pull it all the way over here. So that's my starting point. Yeah, somewhere there. And I'm just going to hit the stopwatch. It's not a rule that you have to hit the stopwatch on the end. It's just a way of thinking, where do I want it to end?
To end up.
So I'm doing this backwards, or the right way, actually.
Yeah, either one's that. It's just the way, whatever makes sense for thinking about it in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, most of all of these effects or all of these things that we're teaching today are guidelines, not rules. So it's super cool to be able to learn a way of doing something and then trying to find the complete opposite way of doing that. And maybe that creates a whole nother effect altogether that was undiscovered.
Absolutely.
So definitely experiment and find your way of stylizing things and changing the properties.
Wow. That's beautiful. That adds so much. Like, it's so subtle, but it adds so much. It really makes it feel even more like you're moving through the sky or something, or like the light. Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, super cool. It already adds effect.
Definitely adds a whole nother element.
John says, okay, so it shows the passage of time.
Yeah,
we're traveling through time today. Definitely, like, who can say you can do that? This is probably the only space that can travel through time. Yeah. And it works just swell. Absolutely. So that's kind of how it looks more now that it's rendered a little bit faster. Again, we got to keep in mind that it will probably render a lot faster once we actually export it. So a way to do that, to reduce that, could be lengthening the space, right? So you can increase the interval between each keyframes, and so that lengthens how long it takes for something. So the motion. Yeah, that could be one way of doing it, or just decreasing the distance of how far I push that light to begin with can work too. And of course, that I've increased my work area, so that is telling my render preview to render that entire work area. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, for example, if you're just working on the 3-second area, but you have your work area all the way to the back, it will render the whole thing regardless. And you're thinking, but I only wanted to see 2 seconds. Yeah. So definitely a really cool, useful tool there. Now that we have our keyframes here, another housekeeping that's important to do is holding both keyframes here. I'm going to actually, have them both selected. I'm going to right click and go to keyframe assistant, and we have easy ease, easy in, easy out. Most conventionally, easy ease does the job. So basically what that does is like create more of I guess in physics, being able to have that ability of making it look really, really natural, the movement of how things come in, right? Like if you bounce the ball doesn't just go up and down. The gravity, the density of that weight will like make it go slower at the top or the bottom, then it goes as it goes and it moves into space, right? So this kind of just imitates that idea too, where things come in slowly and come out faster, but you can also manipulate that too. So I'm just going to show you how that looks visually. So we're just going to click Easy Ease, which is going to make our keyframes look a little bit different, right? So they went from looking like a diamond to looking sort of like one of those. Oh, like I have one of those here, actually, this little guy.
The hourglass.
An hourglass.
Yeah.
So now it looks like an hourglass. I wonder if that's intentional. But yeah, now it looks like a different shape, which lets you know that you've changed that property. And we can go here into the graph editor. So it's this little symbol here, and it'll give us a visual of what that looks like. And that's super cool to see because you can actually come in here into each anchor and then manipulate the way that looks. And so you can change the velocity of it. You can see it has this curvature here. So it's like going uphill, right? So it's going to go slower and then arrive. So really cool. So you have these other little kind of easy ease, easy out. You can see them right here more visually. You can click one of these and change it. I mean, that one's already in curve. So anyways, you can change it here on this one. So it will change the way it goes up. So now it's like a higher hill, right, to go upwards.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. This is a bit more of an advanced area when it comes to creating animation on your keyframes and easing those animations. But just having that easy ease will allow like the program itself to create this graph for you so you don't have to. And that works really well in most animations already. So it improves the quality of your animation. So
yeah,
let's do that.
Makes it more natural.
Yeah. So let's get out of here by clicking that graph editor again. I'm going to enter my pre-compose. I remember I have some keyframes in here too. So I'm going to make sure those are easy ease. I'm going to hit the letter U, and that brings in that particular animation as opposed to all of the different properties that I have available to me. So again, compartmentalizing so that my brain doesn't go haywire like, oh my God, so many options.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Cyn, this is so awesome. And we're going to continue this tomorrow, right? So we'll be jumping right back into this. If you had questions that were unanswered, come back tomorrow. We're going to be showing more of this. And thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned. There's an Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Claudia coming up next. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll see you tomorrow.
Excited.